Good morning, everyone. My name is Fireweed, and I'm coming to you from Denman Island this morning wearing my Planting and Protecting Trees for the Future hat. We are a subcommittee of the Denman Island Climate Action Network. And Denman Island is located on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation and the shared territories of the Kwakwakwa and Coast Salish peoples. This morning, we're going to be speaking to Frank Hovenden, who is the first arrestee from Waterfall Camp out on southern Vancouver Island. It was the 19th of May when Frank was arrested, and we're going to speak a little bit about his reason for getting arrested, his involvement with the forestry industry, and how we may be moving forward in this province. We had some big news this morning from First Nations, but we're not going to delve too far into that this morning because we're not really sure where that news is going to go. We're all waiting with bated breath to see what it all means. But in the interim, we have had over 170 arrests in Fairy Creek and the surrounding areas. And as I mentioned, Frank was the first from the Comox Valley to be arrested at the Waterfall Camp. So welcome, Frank.
Thank you.
It was just thrilling for me to watch the short video clip of your arrest. We've known each other for, I would say almost 3 decades now.
Yeah.
So I know your strong environmental background. And to hear you dedicate your arrest to the memory of 2 beloved Comox Valley elder women who are no longer with us, Ruth Masters and Melda Buchanan, along with your late ecology professor, Gordon Baskerville. It was just a very moving moment for me to see that. And certainly I hold Melda and Ruth, who were personal friends, in my own heart. And I know that they would have been very proud of you in taking this action. So I'm wondering where we should start here. Perhaps a little bit about your background, because you worked in the forest industry for quite some time.
That's right. That's right. I worked here on the coast for over 30 years in the forest industry. I prefer to call it the timber industry because they're not really interested in forest. They're interested in timber to mill and sell. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I'm sure that people are very critical of me saying, how could you work for 30 years and then turn your back on the industry? Well, I'm not turning my back on the industry. I'm fighting for the forests.
Yes.
It always had that, the basics in my heart.
Well, your background includes a Bachelor of Science in Forestry then.
Yes, I graduated from the University of New Brunswick in 1976 with Bachelor of Science in Forestry. More lately, I've added to my education with a professional certificate from the University of Victoria on ecological restoration. And since retiring, I've devoted a lot of my time for a restoration project right here in Comox Valley at the Air Park and a few other locations, where I'm involved in trying to bring back a Gary Oak meadow.
Oh, fantastic. So getting up to Fairy Creek, this wasn't your first time there, I understand.
No, I've traveled there to protest 3 times this spring. The first time was with Royanne Petrel, who has discovered several pairs of screech owls. Very interesting. So the first time we spent a few days with her in River Camp, which is about 6 kilometers up the road from headquarters. There's a small patch of old growth left there in this field of plantation forestry. It's right by Renfrew Creek. And so I think that's one of the first places where we heard I heard the screech owls there, and so did Royanne.
Wonderful. I know that has really blown up in terms of interest, especially with Paul Manley's engagement and now calling for endangered species legislation to protect all old growth ecosystems.
Yes, it's a listed species. Unfortunately, BC does not have any Endangered Species Act. So we're depending on using the Species at Risk Act by the federal government, which I don't know how that's going to play out here, but we'll see.
Right, right. So your next trip up after that initial one to Fairy Creek?
The next trip up to the area, I tried to get into Kaikous camp. Unfortunately, the police had set up a roadblock that morning that we arrived there and would not let anyone in. The roadblock was about, I think, 5 or 6 kilometers down the road, Kaikous, Maine, from where the camp was in the old growth. And so the police had set up a roadblock and were not letting anybody through, including press, that day. The next morning, a convoy of police vehicles, which escorted some press in. I believe there was six press vehicles with many more RCMP vehicles, both before and after them. And they took them in, showed them what they wanted to show them, and took them out. They had no freedom there was no freedom of the press there. It was tightly controlled by the RCMP.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And following that, a large convoy of protesters came to that blockade and set up a camp there. I'll say that I was quite angry, and
Sure.
And you know, it's important to remember to the protesters that the RCMP are not the enemy. They're a tool of the enemy. They're a tool of the politicians, and you know, it's hard to remember that because the RCMP carrying so much baggage in terms of being sexist, of being racist, of being a paramilitary force. So it's very hard to take that and leave that alone and concentrate on the job that you're there to do, which is peaceful protest.
Right.
So
can I ask you, Frank, if there were preparations while in the camp, discussions about nonviolent civil disobedience and general protocol on the front lines dealing with these tools of the state?
Yes, Rainforest Flying Squad, you know, when you contact them, they'll send you information about the nonviolent nature of the protest and protocol. They had actually a liaison officer there. So when several of us were getting quite angry and, you know, taunting the Mounties, so they called us back and reminded us of that, which was very good. And so I realized I was very upset at that day. So I pulled back and left that camp. I was planning to stay a few days, but I wanted to cool down. So I wisely pulled out of that. And I had some time to think about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. You know, I did not want to get in a conflict with the Mounties as such, because basically they're drones who are just doing a job.
Right.
As disgusting as that sounds, but you know, our fight is not with them; it's with their masters, overlords, the politicians who are giving them the orders.
Right. Yeah. Well, that show of force, though, with all of those vehicles rolling in, I remember watching the video clips. It was just unbelievable how all of that could possibly be necessary. So that second visit then, Frank, was that fairly instrumental for you in determining your course of action?
Yes, it was. I realized, you know, what I wanted to do and where I wanted to do it. And, you know, I was planning to get arrested because I think the numbers are important. But I didn't want to be arrested for the wrong thing. You know, I want to be arrested for blocking a road into a logging area, not for taunting a police officer or something silly.
Well, can you remind me, because I'm sure we knew each other back in '93, maybe not yet. I'm not sure now, but were you at Clackwood Sound? Were you involved?
No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't, and that's part of the reason why I'm here. I feel guilty that I wasn't there. I knew what was going on, and that was really a turning point in my life, and in my life in forestry, is realizing that I was on the wrong side of the fight. I was fighting for the bad guys, you know. When I went to forestry school, I had this naive idea that I would come out and I'd be the cowboy wearing the white hat. But when I got involved with the industry here, you know, I realized that we weren't wearing the white hats. We were wearing the black hats. We were the bad guys. And despite, you know, saying that we're practicing scientific forestry, we were liquidating old growth and replacing it with plantations. Simple as that. Destroying ecosystems. And, you know, people 30 years ago didn't talk about things like biodiversity, didn't talk about ecosystems. It was jobs. Look, for every tree we plant or we cut down, we plant 10. You know, that's the simplistic message that was given out, and many people have drunk that Kool-Aid thinking it's not such a bad thing. Science has advanced far more, and I think the public has become more educated and realized that this simplistic message of planting what you've cut is not the answer here anymore. It may have worked 100 years ago, but we're far more advanced than that. We realize that forests are far more than just fiber farms, and we have to have very sophisticated. If we're going to play around with that, we need to recognize that nature supplies everything, and nature comes first. It's not an afterthought, which it is for the forest industry. You know, you cut your trees and you leave a little patch of scrub in the middle, so it's not a clear cut, or you leave a few trees along a creek, and you're saying you're protecting that creek, but you still cut massive amounts of the land base.
I wonder if you'd like to share a little bit about your observations on the role industry has played in holding us back essentially from operating in a more ecosystem sensitive manner. Now, you've talked a little bit about jobs. What would you say about the downsizing of the workforce, for example, over the last 40 years?
Well, it's been continuous downsizing. And so virtually now, you know, just look around you. When I came here, the IWA, which used to be the woods union for woods workers and sawmill workers, had 3 offices here in Courtenay. 3 different locals had offices. Now there's 1. So that sort of reflects about the size of the memberships. And looking from where I worked, you know, there used to be 3 sawmills, large sawmills in Tassus. Those are gone. There was a pulp and paper mill in Gold River. That's gone. Getting closer in the Campbell River, you know, the huge Elk Falls pulp and paper mill gone. That probably employed over 1,000 workers easy. Timber West sawmill, that's gone there. Raven lumber, that's gone. Then coming right here in Courtenay, we had 1 sawmill, Premex Field Sawmill, and that was bought by Interfor and shut down a couple of years after they bought it. So that's just this little corner of Vancouver Island. That trend has been repeated all over, not only Vancouver Island, all over BC. And, you know, how much was that due to timber being taken away by environmental protests? Virtually none of it. This is what's happening here. The bottom line is mechanization and computerization. So in sawmills, you have lasers replacing sawyers. Used to be a skilled job. In the woods, you have feller bunchers replacing fallers. Again, used to be a very highly skilled and highly paid job. Virtually now, hand fallers are limited to little bits of old growth that are left and a few sections of second growth, which are too steep or too rough to send in a machine. But virtually most of the falling and the yarding is all mechanized now. You know, when I started, you know, you'd have a tower with, you know, seven people in it. Then it went to a grapple yarder with 3 people. And now you have a feller buncher and a large skidder of some sort. So 2 people doing more than all those people used to do formerly. So mechanization has been constant. And this is part of the reason why the industry wants to get rid of old growth, because old growth is not amenable to mechanization. But these young stands, these young forests, which they're cutting now, the second growth, is perfectly designed for mechanization. The trees are all pretty similar in size. They're fairly small. Just an engineer's dream to, you know, get a machine that can go in there and do what, you know, many men used to take. It used to take the work of many men. Now it's all mechanized. In the woods, not all, but the majority of the harvesting is mechanized, because the majority of the harvesting here on southern Vancouver Island is no longer in old growth. There just isn't the old growth left. The majority is in second growth plantations.
I see, yes. So, and what would the unions have to say about all of this?
What union? You know, the unions have been destroyed. There are very few unionized jobs left in the woods now. This started 40 years ago with and every time you hear the unions going to on strike, the biggest bone to pick is with something called contracting out. So the big companies contract out their workforce, and this makes it easy. They don't have to deal with people. You know, they don't have to get their hands dirty dealing with people. So they have a contractor, smaller contractor. You've got him on a short lease. He's only has a short contract, so he's not going to raise. He's very competitive with other contractors. You know, and this has been going on for some years. So there's very few unionized workers left in the woods. In fact, I worked in one of the last unionized workplaces, I think in Gold River logging, and then I've just heard Western Forest Products is now pulled out of Gold River. So they'll just have a few contractors in there. Their office, I think, would probably be administered out of Campbell River now.
Oh, interesting. So bringing us up to your decision for arrest, was that made, obviously you were thinking about it for some time, but when you went up around was it the middle of the month then?
No, I wasn't. I was going up there and wanted to see what was playing out. I went to the headquarters and they suggested that it might be they needed people up at another camp called Waterfall because they expected some action there. So I went up there, and my hope was actually to meet up with Royanne, who wanted to go even further up. And in fact, she didn't show up. I don't know if she was blocked because the next day the Mounties moved in on that camp, and we had sort of word that it was going to happen. I mean, the helicopter was going around. I mean, they've got all the toys, the helicopters, the drones, and forces ready to combat terrorists. They look like they're dressed in their armor and whatnot. But we had word that they were probably coming in the next morning. And so I decided it would be a good time for me to get arrested there. And it also, I was what's called a soft block. So I just sat on the road and refused to move. Behind me were some people who were more hardcore people, I suppose you could call them, who were in things called dragons, which are where you're chained into concrete blocks underground, and it's very difficult to remove these people. So I was in front of these people, which allowed them to get a little bit of time to set up. Oh. And because even in a soft block, if you just, for protesters, I'll suggest you go limp. You never put up any resistance, but by going limp, you force the police to carry you out, which takes 4 policemen probably 20 minutes. And it's all about timing in this protest. The longer it takes, the more trees you're going to save.
Exactly. So that's a very good point, because I know some people wonder about being just escorted by the arm out, not wanting to engage in any kind of resistance.
Yeah.
And that is a very traditional tactic within nonviolent civil disobedience, to just go limp, is it not?
Yes. And I mean, one of the policemen said, by going limp, you're resisting arrest, which is absolutely not true. I said, I'm not resisting, I'm going limp. And they had a stretcher, which they put you on, and they're quite good. They strap you in, they made sure it wasn't too tight. And then they roll you down the road on this stretcher device to take you to the police car.
Yeah, that was interesting to see. I think that's new.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I've seen pictures of people being put on tarps and carried.
Right, or simply by the arms and legs back in the day of Blackwood.
Yeah, so maybe because I thought, oh, here's an old guy, we don't want to hurt him, and so I got special treatment. I don't know.
Interesting. How exactly did that arrest take place? Did they come up to you with paperwork? Words?
No words. Are you aware that there is an injunction? It's been passed by the Supreme Court, and are you going to leave this road and allow us free passage? And I said no, and so they said, well, we're arresting you.
Oh, so they've actually stopped giving out these reams of paper.
Well, I got the reams of paper later. They brought me down to they've set up a station just outside of Port Renfrew. They have quite a large camp there where they have a lot of the Mounties set up in trailers and tents, and they had a large, I guess you'd call it a command vehicle there with all sorts of computers and things in there, and they processed me there. Now, on the other side of the island Kaikou side, and they're taking people to Cowichan Lake and processing them there. But there's a temporary camp set up in Port Renfrew where I was processed.
I see. So is that where they actually lay charges?
No, I'm learning things as I go through the legal system here. The Mounties actually don't lay charges. They aren't allowed to lay charges. What they do is they give you what's called what is it called? An undertaking.
Okay.
And the charges have to be laid by the Crown prosecutor. So they serve you with this undertaking, and they have you sign that saying you won't return to TFL 46, I believe it is. And then they give you a court date, and mine's in July something. And so you don't even appear before the judge in the first court date. The first court date is before a clerk, and it just makes sure that you have received the charges, which were supposedly by that time will be laid by the Crown prosecutor.
You haven't been arrested before, you're saying?
No, no.
Okay.
No, I'm just a regular law-abiding citizen, paying taxes, living in a small bungalow in Courtenay.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for taking a stand. And I hope there'll be others from the Comox Valley to follow suit over the days and weeks to come. Because as you've pointed out, Frank, obviously the numbers are incredibly important. Mm-hmm. And is your sense that the scale of the demonstrations is making an impact?
Oh yes, yeah, definitely, and it seems to be picking up momentum. And there's certain things that I can tell you the police are very afraid of, and which scares them. And that's the day I was there. There was a large group of seniors that arrived from Victoria, and they were going up to a camp, I believe it was on Spur 2000 off of Braden, Maine, something like that. And this large group arrived there, and the RCMP just dissolved. They took down their little tape and dissolved. So I presume they do not want to be seen arresting grandpa and grandma protecting old growth. And the same thing happened, I think on the following weekend, there was a large get together at headquarters. Not well reported. I believe it was well over 1,000 people showed up there. Families. Again, police were nowhere to be seen.
That's right. That's right. I was there that day.
Okay.
Quite a few people were redirected up to Waterfall where they were needed. But yes, there was just a huge turnout. Presence of First Nations there as well. And a very clear directive from the organizers of the camps that we are on. We're visitors on traditional First Nations territory. It really did feel historic, and I'm sorry that the media was in short supply that day. I don't really understand it. We did encounter counter protesters on the way there. Has your experience out on the blockades been, really just with the police, or any altercations with people in industry?
Not really. No, the people in industry where they did go by, they didn't stop, didn't look. They just, went where they were going. And
right.
So I think there has been some small protests in Cowichan, but they've been small because there's very few people left. I mean, you don't see any Teal Jones trucks, marked with Teal Jones, because they're all contractors, and there's very few of them left with jobs. So, I have a certain sympathy for these people. These are the last, as we have the last of the old growth, these are the last of the old traditional loggers. They're,
right.
They've had fathers and grandfathers who may have worked for the big companies like McMillan, Bloedel, and BC Forest Products, who worked in those areas for many years. And so there's a large history, but as terms of numbers, the jobs aren't there anymore. They're gone. The mills are gone. Yubo, big sawmill, Timber West shut many years ago. That's gone. So there's just few jobs. And in fact, I understand many of the industry protesters came out. We're not even from that area. They came from North Island and various parts all over Vancouver Island.
Oh, is that right?
And there wasn't huge numbers because there's not huge numbers of workers left. The union's basically been destroyed, so you don't have that. Teal Jones doesn't have a workforce. It's all contractors. So you don't see them. So, I feel sorry for these people too, because it used to be able to make a good living working in the woods, and it's tougher and tougher, and there's fewer and fewer people. And they know that. They know that. They're not stupid. They're running scared.
Yes. Well, and it's heartening too that a great deal of care is being taken, it seems to me, by the protesters, folks involved with Rainforest Flying Squad and others, making a real point of clarifying that this movement is not about being anti-logger. It is very much about sustainable jobs and sustainable harvesting into the future. It's may not feel that way in the short term by people who are directly impacted for their jobs, but clearly, once this old growth is gone, then what?
Exactly. And there's so little left. I mean, some of these areas were noted for their fantastic stands. I remember hearing about the Walbrand Valley and the magnificent trees there. And now we're fighting over these teeny little patches that remain. The majority of the wood harvesting there is not coming from old growth. It's from the second growth. So it would not be a huge loss to just step aside and leave these last remnants of old growth alone. And once they're gone for good.
Yes.
I mean, old growth, it takes, these stands are many hundreds, some approaching thousands of years old.
It is a phenomenal experience to be in the presence of those ancient trees.
And this compares with the second growth stands, which are being harvested now between 50 and 80 years old, and then planted again and harvested. So we've taken an agriculture model where we farm trees and put it in a forest setting, and it's not appropriate in many ways, and it doesn't work well in many ways.
Well, Frank, thank you so much for your insights. You're an excellent example that people in industry do change, and as we learn more, hopefully we can do better. Would you have any final words of advice, perhaps, for people who are thinking of heading up to the blockades?
I would encourage everyone to go to the blockade. It isn't necessary to get arrested. If you want to get arrested, they've set up liaison people and observers who are going to watch your arrest and make sure it goes down in a civilized way. The more people out there showing the broad level of support, families, seniors, the stronger the case is going to be. And I'd suggest if you're sitting on the fence and saying, should I go or shouldn't I go? Look in the mirror. And this is an old environmentalist mantra. Say, look in the mirror and say, if not you, who? If not now, when?
The future is, of course, in the hands of this current government, but also in its relationship with Indigenous peoples. So it'll be very interesting to watch how things unfold from here. But I want to thank you again so much for your time today, for all of the expertise that you have lent to conservation over the many years in the Comox Valley. And again, for getting arrested and being a role model for us all. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.